Previously on Men Children of the Atom.
Luckily, I'm a short guy, but I'm still like bent over at the waist.
Oh, God.
Like,
this is two guys picking each other up in the 60s when you weren't allowed to do that in public.
Disney doesn't want to get their fingerprints on the Holocaust.
This idea was so good, I had to come back. Excelsior!
That son of a bitch will still find a way to screw me out of residuals. I guarantee you that.
Stanley.
Oh, you got a friggin' succubus demon in your brain.
Oh, he jerks off 8 times a day.
Every time we use the microwave, I shit myself. God. Oh, of course. He's the hot guy in
hot dog. It's the hot dog car guy. All is forgiven between us. I forgive you, and you have forgiven me.
I don't know what fight means.
I don't know either.
It's just fight.
My adult children and my girlfriend who's the same age as them.
This was a government contract that cost like $3 trillion over the course of like 12 years.
Oh my God.
They raised taxes on the 99% of people.
Halliburton and Blackwater produced.
Oh,
they produced
Halliburton
this little folder that just said 12 missiles, stats, 11 intelligence, and 12 charm or whatever.
And,
I have always thought of you as a white straight Botomeo.
I think instead of missiles, they launch a bunch of jars of mayonnaise at your house.
This podcast is over. And welcome to Man Children of the Atom, episode 11. We are now past the end of season 1, and welcome to our season 1 recap episode. I'm Matt.
I'm Brett.
Brett, you know what's coming. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I've got a beer. I've got some chips. I'm celebrating the end of the season. I'm celebrating our celebration of this show, and I'm ready to go.
For curiosity's sake,
yeah.
What's the beer and what are the chips?
Ooh, I have one of my favorite beers, Cloud Candy. This is a New England IPA. It's very tasty, and the chips are like the Santa Maria something, tortilla chips.
Sure.
With sea salt.
So thank you to our corporate sponsors.
Yes.
Cloud9, Santa Maria, whatever.
Cloud Candy.
Joanne Fabric.
Cloud Candy, which is the Mighty Squirrel Brewing Company.
Yes. Thank you so much for your support.
Where I used to live.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. We couldn't do it without you.
Oh, big time. Beer, I couldn't do it without you.
I'm not a metaphor. Have a tall glass of water.
Oh, nice.
In a used Dunkin' Donuts cup because I'm a trash person.
You are someone who recycles. It's beautiful.
That's right. I'm getting my money's worth out of these cups. So we made it. We achieved our goal of going episode by episode through all 10. But as we've mentioned a couple times, we have loved doing this and we didn't want to stop the conversation. And we had some thoughts that didn't quite fit any one episode. It was more about the series as a whole. And we thought this would be a good chance to dip our toe out of what has been our format and just have fun.
I agree. And do you want to tell the fine people what we have planned for them today, or do we want to do it a surprise, just section by section?
Boy, do we have some plans. I don't mind telling them what they're gonna say. I don't mind threatening them with a good time. So we're gonna have just some discussion about our thoughts on the entirety of the season, and then we're gonna get into a little activity where we've got some tier list making sites loaded up, and we are going to create a couple tier lists live here while we record. And we'll end up putting those out on our Blue Sky, whatever social media platforms. And then we will have a very special event. It's the first ever Man Children of the Atom Awards, the Manchies, which will be enjoying a night of glitz and glamour with those. And then finally, we are going to open up the mailbag of the Atom and take some listener questions and talk about those here with you to show some appreciation for the folks who have taken the time to actually listen to these conversations that Brett and I have so enjoyed recording.
Yeah, I can't wait. I am excited about every single part of this, but I think the thing I'm most excited about is to converse with the people, to speak with the people,
Yes.
and answer their lovely questions.
Yes, we can cultivate a beautiful parasocial relationship. Although at
Yes.
this point, our listeners are all people we have actual relationships with already.
Yeah,
But
but
if you're
those
the
relationships,
listener who doesn't already know us, thanks for listening.
and you too could one day be a good friend of ours if you just listen long enough.
And send us your questions.
And tell more of your friends to if you tell
Yeah,
two friends to listen, then you'll be like a really good friend. And if you tell five friends, you'll be a best friend.
that's right.
There's a whole tier system to it.
It's a Ponzi scheme, really, and that's
But
what
you don't
we've
tell
always
them
aimed
that.
for. But we're telling them because they're going to be on the ground floor or the top floor,
That's right.
whichever
Well,
one.
ground floor now, top floor
Yeah.
later.
So if you enjoy the show, tell your friends. If you hate the show, tell your enemies. Punish them.
Yes.
So let's get down into it because we do have a lot of stuff we want to get through in this episode. Starting with what we're best at, just talking about the show. So season 1, overall in review, taken as a whole. Brett, why don't you lead off? Give me some of your thoughts on how it comes together as a cohesive whole.
Yeah, so I have my notes here. I have it broken down in three different sort of categories. There's the character category,
Mm.
the overall story plot category, and then something that I can touch on later or I can touch on it now, which is on the last episode, I pitched how to fix the glaring issue with the final episode, which is the Xavier Magneto
You did.
two-hander. And now I have another pitch for Marvel, which is a business model pitch about how they should go forward because their movies are floundering. Nobody really cares anymore. The fans are up in arms. They had the pathetically desperate move to bring Robert Downey Jr. back. I
Yeah.
believe I'm hearing rumors that Chris Evans is also coming back.
I've heard rumors, but not more than that.
Yeah, so it's just a thing where it's like they're falling apart and they need me, a man of the people, to tell them how to go forward.
Absolutely.
So I'll start with the character stuff and we can go
Please,
back and
let's
forth
dive
from
in.
there.
Yeah.
I think one of the best parts of this show, and is a marked improvement over the original show, which I love dearly,
Mm-hmm.
is how well they get every single character. It's not that the old
Yes.
show didn't get the characters right. Obviously, they did, especially with the voices and like just how they presented themselves. But this one gave us such a deeper view of them. We've said it multiple times. This was a Cyclops redemption tour.
Oh, big time.
He's so good in this. They perfectly nail the idea of like he's the leader and there's that the crown hangs heavy sort of thing. But he understands the importance of the X-Men in the world. There's a handful
Mm-hmm.
of moments where he's like, we matter to mutants, and so we have to sort of carry that with a certain level of responsibility. That's something I admire about that character and the way they wrote it.
Agreed.
Wolverine shifting him to be a supporting character is
Mm-hmm.
so good and such a breath of fresh air after having him be the main star for like 20 years.
Yes.
And the last thing I'll say, even though I love Storm and Jubilee and all that, the last thing I'll say is this really got hammered home to me in the last episode. The character arc for Bastion is really interesting
Mm.
because he goes from basically a supremacist who thinks that mutants need to be annihilated or at the very least enslaved to basically benefit mankind. It's a
Yeah.
zero-sum game. In the last episode, he's just a nihilist. Like he's just like, I'm just going to
Yeah.
destroy the world.
Yeah.
And that, we try not to get political on the show, as you know, but just I'm someone who tries to keep a foot firmly in the real world, in the internet world. I try to straddle that line as best I can. And the supremacist to nihilist pipeline feels very accurate to me.
Oh, it's a permeable membrane. It is.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
the thing about supremacy, dear listeners, if you haven't figured this out yet,
Mm.
is that the promise of supremacy is a lie. It's never going to happen. It is itself a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
You're never going to get what
Truly.
you
Yeah.
want. And at a certain point, the cult members realize that. Even if they don't
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge it, they kind of realize it at like a bone deep level. And they just
Yeah.
become nihilists who are like, you know what? Nobody's life matters. Who cares if we have to kill a bunch of people? It's just nothing matters. And like
Yeah.
Bastion's journey to that, even though this is, again, a silly cartoon about mutants with crazy powers, is like a pretty accurate portrayal that the real live action movies wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole.
I think you're right. And I think, though, this isn't a disagreement, I guess just an expansion on that thought, is it does go both ways, right? The disillusionment after realizing like supremacy promised you something and it gave you nothing, at least the nihilism, but also being trapped in nihilism. If you haven't already been in those, like there's something attractive in that, like, oh, I could be,
Oh yeah,
that promise becomes alluring.
there's a level of empowerment to it.
There certainly is. And right until it falls apart. And
Well,
then
it's
you're back to
cancer. I
nihilism
mean,
until the new idea comes along, and then you're in that. And yeah, because if you don't have a stable sense of your own like inherent worth as a person, right, you're very vulnerable to both of those types of ideologies or lacks thereof.
yeah. I mean, nihilism is basically that you believe in nothing at a certain point.
Yeah,
It's
we
a great.
believe in nothing, Lebowski.
Yes. Yes.
Which, by the way, the few folks who listen and maybe follow us on Blue Sky, I had the realization that the Jean Grey clobbering Sinister with bowling balls. I was like, where else have I seen someone just get taken down by a ball? Oh, it's in The Big Lebowski. Walter just rails that nihilist in the stomach with a bowling ball to start that fight. And it never doesn't work, folks. It's always great. A great time to watch someone get destroyed by a bowling ball.
Say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism, at least it's an ethos.
An ethos. Woof.
And for those who don't know,
You're like a child who wanders in.
For those who don't know, I believe the Coens have poo-pooed this.
Oh.
But that character is very clearly inspired by John Milius, famous Hollywood crazy person and right-winger.
So, Joel, Ethan, we know you're listening. Go ahead and write in and tell us the true inspirations for Walter Sobchak.
One of my favorite characters, played by one of my favorite actors.
Oh, absolutely. There's not a bad casting in that movie.
He's the guy who elevates everything he's in.
Right down to the big characters. Even David Thewlis as Knox Harrington, the video artist. Like the casting is just pitch perfect in that.
Yeah, that movie is. I can go on and on about it. All right, so that's my character takeaway. Do you want me to pass the ball to you, or do you want me to keep going?
I guess I'll just say. So you covered Cyclops a little bit. This season of this show reminded me why, when I was younger and actively reading these comic books, I thought Cyclops was cool. Mm. And then we had, a couple decades of media the movies especially were brutal on the character, and
which is a real shame because that actor, I like James Marsden.
Sure, it's not the actor's fault. They wasn't given the right things to do with the script. But yeah, feeling like, oh well, yeah, what a dork ass character. But like, no, that was just mischaracterization when he's written well, which Claremont did, and these writers did. There is something really to like and respect in this. Like, yeah, interpersonally, he's kind of uptight and awkward, but that's because he is taking life so taking the mission so taking the fact that he can't open his eyes without murdering people seriously. And we get to see him when he's in the situations for which that's actually the appropriate attitude. He is cool in those moments. It's when he's like at ease that like that's where the disconnect is. And I think this season got that, right? We saw him being awkward and uncomfortable, just being normal, but every fight scene, every mission, like it's like, oh shit, here we go. Here's Cyclops.
Yeah, he really was an MVP of the show.
Big time. You mentioned also Bastion, which I liked what you said there. Who did you mention between Cyclops and Bastion? Was there
just the idea of Wolverine as a supporting character?
Yes. Which I love. I had lunch with a friend of mine today who just listened to our first episode. So
nice.
Thank you, Matt. And we were talking a little bit, and he mentioned how one of the things that the animated series has gotten right, I think in a couple of incarnations, and also the comics got right, that the movies really fumbled with, was the movies needing to focus so much on just a very small number of the characters. And that's part of what there is to love about X-Men. It is this big world, and there is this wide range of characters that each brings something to the table that you can enjoy and appreciate. And when everything is the Wolverine show, you do miss some of that.
Oh, big time.
And Wolverine is an interesting enough guy that you can put him in the background and he's still going to pop, right? He's still going to be...
That's a good point.
Have like enough to add, enough to do just with his present little comments that he doesn't need to be the focus of everything. He can step into the foreground when he needs to and still be entertaining in the background.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, yeah, those are my thoughts on those. This was also a hell of a season for Rogue as a character.
Yes.
Boy, I loved her journey, and I love that it touches on to the fact, Rogue wasn't always a hero, right? And here we get to see Rogue kind of straddling that line of like, it's not that her motives are in question, but like, what is she willing to do about them? She was willing to cross lines others maybe wouldn't. She got a great ride this year. This is going to bleed into our tier list stuff, but those are some of the really good arcs. There are some where I don't think they were mischaracterized. When we do the tier list, we'll get into it, but where, I don't know, we just didn't dive as deep with some of the characters, which it is a big cast. You can't, not in 10 episodes. But yeah, those are some of the standouts, I would say.
Yeah, agreed. And
and Magneto. Like I said, fucking A, Magneto. This was Magneto's season.
Magneto's terrific. He's one of those characters who, if you screw up Magneto, you've sort of royally screwed up. He's been blessed with a lot of great iterations.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So like that, it just kind of goes without saying. But yeah, I mean, they really did shoot like 90%.
Yeah.
You can only kind of count on just two fingers how many characters you're like, that could have been better.
Xavier.
Yeah, and I guess to a little bit Morph. Like Morph kind of gets the short end of things.
Yeah, I'll save my thoughts for the tier list thing, but yes.
Yeah, and as far as just the story and the plot goes, I loved this subtle evolution throughout the series or the season.
Yeah,
where they get this escalation of threats, where it literally goes from, like we said in the first episode, ground level brown shirts, like not really that well organized Nazis, to by the end, it's this highly orchestrated, systemic attack. And I think again, the show does a great job of translating the real world into a much more palatable TV show. It's a really well observed approach that we go from street Nazis to radicalization through technology, which is essentially what Bastion represents. And he's like a former, OZT is like a former government agency, which lends,
or like quasi-governmental.
Yeah, quasi. But that sort of lends like these credentials to it as like it's funded by powerful people.
Sure.
And so A, it's just classic X-Men, but B, it does a really good job, I think, of taking elements from the 92 show and evolving them for what we're watching now and how things are now, so that it feels very much like a show in the 90s, but that it is somehow informed by the modern times. It was just a great job.
I appreciate, speaking of that, like escalation of the villains throughout the season, that in retrospect, even though they didn't themselves know it, the Friends of Humanity, as you say, like these isolated equivalent of Nazis, right, street gangs kind of thing, they were actually part of Bastion's bigger plan, even though they themselves didn't know that, right? They were influenced by everything, the media, the messaging, whatever that was put out there, right? Bastion was intentionally trying to influence public sentiment, right? In that speech that he gives, he talks about that was part of it. And the disappointment when Gyrick fucked it up and got too much sympathy for mutants. And but like they didn't know they were carrying out his agenda, but they were. It's I'm trying to remember the is it stochastic terrorism, whatever, where it's like it's not that there's necessarily a direct chain of orders, but like I'm gonna put this stuff out there and people are gonna follow these cues of like here, basically attack. Here's the target group, attack. You're justified in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
And so what seemed like one-offish, right, organic, actually does tie to this larger, like, well, who shapes people's worldview and understanding of what the problems of society are?
Yeah, it's they don't obviously dive into the details of that, but to give, again, for a cartoon show to even play with those ideas, I felt was just so well done.
I agree. So why don't we'll shift gears. Why don't we work on a couple of tier lists to collect our thoughts about this season?
Love it.
And I've got two ready for us to do, and I'll share my screen so we can look at the same thing. And listeners, you're just going to have to imagine it.
Yeah.
And however you're imagining it, it looks 10 times better than that. And that's being Modest. All right. So we're going to do 2. And the first one is going to be fairly straightforward. This is just ranking the episodes by quality, by overall quality. And so we've got our tier list here with the 10 episodes of the season, and we're just going to put them on it's set up to have S, A, B, C, and D tiers. And let's start, I think, maybe for this one, we're just going to go episode by episode. We can change them as needed as we discuss, as we figure out the relative positioning of these to each other. But starting with episode 1, I thought that was a solid start. It's not S tier. I'm going to say that belongs in probably the B tier, but you could make the case that it could go A. I think probably B.
I feel the exact same way. It straddles that line between A and B.
Yep.
But we'll give it the B.
Yeah. If we need to move it, we'll move it. Episode 2, Mutant Liberation begins. Yeah. That is a clear S.
Yeah.
That's standard setting for the rest of the season.
It really is. I mean, I said this on that episode. I'll say it again. Episodes 1 and 2 dropped on the same day.
They did.
Episode 1, we both said is, in baseball terms, it's a great leadoff hitter, makes contact, base hit. And then as soon as episode 2 ended, I texted like 5 different people. I was literally going through my phone contact list, looking for my dealer's number. Like, who can I talk to about the X-Men right now? It is such a good episode that I'm still like, is that the best episode of the season? Oh,
you can make the case. I think it might be. You can make the case. It's hard to, with some of the other contenders for that, once you step away from shock value first watch, it's tough to say, but yeah, there's a case to be made that this is the best episode of the season and thereby of the entire X-Men animated series.
Yeah.
All 6 seasons. Episode 3, Fire Made Flesh. Now this one I have a little bit of a tough time with because there are S tier moments and there are like some C and D tier, or maybe it's not even the moments that are low tier, but the way it is like held together by duct tape. It's so chopped short and it jumps from thing to thing. I like the things it jumps to.
Yeah, I wonder how much this episode suffers from comparison
to previous episode.
Not just previous episode, but
to Reading Inferno.
Yeah. Inferno is one of my favorite crossovers. It is one of the more beloved X-Men crossovers, as I understand it. As I say multiple times in the show, I stay away from the internet. I don't go on forums.
No, wait. No, hold on. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire, Brett. You not 10 minutes ago talked about how you straddle the line between the real world and the internet. So which one is it? Do you straddle the line or do you avoid it?
Well, that's the thing. Since I straddle the line, it prevents me from getting too deep. Because I've seen what happens to people who go too deep on the internet. I've seen it personally in my life, and it is not a pretty
peer
sight.
Into the void, and it looks back into you.
Exactly. I don't go on Reddit. I stay away from a lot of comment sections. If I get a sniff of this person is insane, I try to run away as fast as possible. So I don't really know what the wider world's view of Inferno, the comic book, is. But I get the sense that it is a beloved one from the few comments I've seen. So I do think this episode struggles with that comparison, right? Like there is a certain weight to adapting a beloved storyline or arc.
And having a half hour to do it.
And you're only doing it in 30 minutes. Yeah. With that said, if you can kind of remove that, there are still obviously, she becomes the Goblin Queen very quickly.
Yeah.
It is one of those episodes where it's like, there are 2 bad guys in it, right? It's weird because they fight her, then they fight Sinister. So it is bloated in that sense as well.
Yeah.
But with that said, even this thumbnail is a picture of the Goblin Queen with the green powers floating around her.
That scene was great.
It just looks so fucking badass. It's I want to make it an A.
Yep. And the scene later towards the end of the episode, as they're figuring out what to do with Nathan and his virus, and Cyclops' heart breaking that he's going to de facto make an orphan of his son. He can't spare him the pain he went through. Yeah, there are S tier moments, but the episode's not S tier.
Yeah, I think it's an A.
I was torn between A and B. I think if I which did I have a better time watching, episode 1 or episode 3? For all its flaws, I think I did have a better time with episode 3.
And I would also say, like, if you're sitting home, I'll give you an example. Here it is.
Yeah.
Here's the scene, dear listener. So I am getting what is the holy grail in terms of dad gifts this weekend.
Oh, I can't
And
wait to
my
hear it.
wife and twin daughters are going to my in-laws, and I am going to be alone for the majority of Saturday. They're leaving on noon, and so that means from like, well, the goal is leave at noon, which means they probably won't get out of here until like 1:30 because leaving with children is a nightmare.
Right.
So from like 1:30 until Sunday early afternoon, I'm gonna have the house to myself.
Oh my God.
And so if you get a moment like that, you're like, all right, I'm gonna watch a bunch of movies, I'm gonna eat junk
Oh.
food, I'm gonna get drunk, I'm gonna do some drugs. What am I gonna watch? You're probably gonna watch episode 3 over episode 1.
Yes. Yeah. Phrase that way. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So to me alone, that's it. Like you're just like, I want to watch a badass episode of the X-Men
Yeah.
3
Yeah.
because to your point, it has that emotional level to it,
Yep.
but it's not the emotional devastation of episode 5.
Oh God, no.
It's
What is?
it as great as in episode 2 was S tier, but
Yep.
it is connected to episode 1 in a way, right? Like it's taking the baton from episode 1 and running. Episode 3 is kind of a standalone. It is just Inferno.
It
And
is.
so you can jump in, watch it, and it's like, man, what a great freaking episode this is.
That's right. It's
A
fairly
tier.
self-contained. Yeah.
Yeah, A tier episode.
Yeah. Boy, that really put the nail on it. Well argued, but okay. And for listeners who maybe are not married with children, I want to explain something. I want to explain listen up, kids. Pull up because we're going to tell you how it really is.
Yeah.
These are the most important people in our lives that we love more than life itself. But the joy, the value in ever having the house to yourself for, in this case, what is it, an overnight?
It's an overnight.
It is a luxury. It is just because there can be joy in solitude. Togetherness
Listen.
is wonderful, but all things in balance, my friends.
You're talking to perhaps one of the biggest introverts the world has ever known. You're talking to, I think I could be like one of those monks who just lives in a temple, like in the woods somewhere. I mean, the no sex thing would be pretty hard, but
Well,
but
yeah.
but just being alone, there are worse things in life.
It's all in moderation. I love my alone time. I love my together time.
Yeah, I'm like an 80-20 guy.
Yeah. I'm pretty much a straight 50-50.
I'm jealous.
Yeah. And
All right.
like, true. So for anyone's that, oh, don't you love your family? Don't you want to be with them? Like, yeah, I want to be with them most of the time. But I also, having the house to oneself,
Oh, what
it's
a
just
joy.
when you have young kids and stuff, it is an unheard of luxury. And it
Yeah.
is a treat to savor. And Brett, I hope it's everything you dream of.
I can't wait.
All right, let's get back to this. Episode 4. This is Motendo and Life Death Part 1. This has got to be maximum of C tier.
You think so?
You don't think
So-
you think it's higher? You think it's a B?
So here's the thing. I don't know. So I was gonna say I don't know if any of these fall below B, but that might not be true.
Well, we kind of have to though, right? Because we're grading on a curve relative to each
Yeah.
other.
That's
Yeah.
true. So the reason why I think this is a B is because
I'll hear you out.
I think it's a capital G great episode for Jubilee.
Yeah.
And this is the moment where she goes from, a kid, a new mutant, to an official member of the X-Men. She turns 18.
True.
She has that badass outfit, her obsessive character.
Yep.
We do get what I really like from the show, or really any X-Men show, which is we get a lot of different locations. We see a lot of different bad guys.
We do.
And so it's just variety. X-Men is one of those comics where its strength is variety. And so
That I agree with.
And so we do get that in this episode. And we also get one of my favorite jokes, which is Jubilee making fun of Magneto and doing a Magneto impression, which I think is great.
That
So
worked. That landed.
Of the lesser episodes, this is my final thing on it. Of the lesser episodes, I think there were like 3 episodes that aren't great. This
2
is
or
the
3.
best of them.
Okay. You got to factor in Life Death Part 1 here too, though, which I think had, for all that we talked about the pacing issues in episode 3, The life death stuff felt so truncated.
Yeah, that's true.
I like those characters. I like that. It was so short change that it I don't know. It just didn't feel like it got a chance to organically play out the way it needed to.
Yeah, that might bring it down to a C.
Yeah.
So I am focusing almost entirely on the Jubilee part of it.
I do think where I'm hearing you and where you sold me, I think the merits of it, the best qualities of it do save it from D tier. I think maybe I've gone from it shouldn't be higher than C to it shouldn't be lower than C.
So it's a C?
I think it's a C. Let's see how the rest of it fills out if that changes our mind at all.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, episode 5, remember it.
Yeah, we all know what this is.
It's gotta be S.
It's S.
It's sad. It's S for sad though.
It's so sad. But here's the thing. It's the only episode in this season that I think could be considered the best episode of the season. It's either episode 2 or episode 5.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. It's an incredible episode.
It really is. Okay, yeah. Those are our 2 easy S's. Life Death Part 2, episode 6. This is D or C.
Yeah.
If something has to be in D tier, it's this.
It is. And it's a shame because I like the Shi'ar stuff in this.
Yeah.
I just can't stand Xavier. It's the one character they drop the ball on, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'll say I love Storm and I like Forge, and I just don't feel, even this where it did have a little more time to play with it, I don't feel like Life Death, the Storm Forge aspect of Life Death, both was it wasn't what I hoped to be. It wasn't as good as it could have been.
Ditto. Yeah. It was disappointing. I'm glad they did it, but yeah.
And I'll say even the C and D tier here, there are things to like about these episodes.
Oh yeah.
It's not painful to sit. Well, some of Xavier's lines are painful to sit through, but overall it's not. But graded on the curve, this is about as low as it goes.
Agreed.
Yeah. You could convince me if we were doing a tier list that included the original series that this is a more C tier episode than D. But all right, 7. Remember it. Gut is saying A.
Is it called Remember It?
No, excuse me. I'm sorry. It's called Bright Eyes. Yeah, I misspoke.
Yeah, I mean, this
listeners don't tell anybody, but I made a slight error. No, we must own our mistakes.
We get the really good Captain America cameo here. We get Rogue versus the Army, which is a great little fight. The Gambit funeral.
Yeah. Now I don't feel like it. If I ask myself, does this belong shoulder to shoulder with 2 and 5? I don't think it does.
It doesn't.
But it belongs in that next tier. This is an A tier episode.
I would say that this is probably the prototypical A tier episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it's less of like working out to an average of A than 3. This is like just solidly, basically every moment is A tier.
Yeah, exactly right.
Episode 8, Tolerance's Extinction Part 1.
Yeah, this is going to be hard to do because, they're all of a piece.
They are, but there's distinct movements to it.
So I'm going to say the episode 1 is either B or C.
See, I think this is one where we're going to have to split the difference somewhat, because you dislike the conceit of the Prime Sentinels more than I do.
I do.
Yeah, I know it kind of hits a sore spot for you, and I don't quite feel the same way. This does have the Wolverine and Nightcrawler team up in it.
I mean, that
alone keeps it out of any low tiers. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to go with B tier on this one, edging into A.
Oh, it's edging a little bit, huh?
No, it's been edging for hours.
I think B tier is the right place to put it because that fight is great.
Yeah.
And it is a well-written episode. I think one of the things I said on our episode was that it does that really good writing thing where it's setting the board in motion and putting the pieces in place without really telling you that it is.
True.
And so then when it hits the fan, it's like, oh, wow, yeah, it's happening everywhere. It really jumps up on you. It's great.
And I will say, of sort of like the set piece, the fights in the mansion are really good.
Mm-hmm.
The Cyclops, Cable, Jean Grey, and Bastion's hometown stuff, the build up of kind of like the mystery of getting into like this the creepy house with the mom is good. But then when we get to the actual action set piece, like the chase, it's just good. It's not great. It's just good.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
It does have the good that this is the one that has the Val Cooper speech at the end, right?
Yes.
Does
I
it also
believe
have
so.
does it also have Bastion's speech?
I think you're right. I think it is episode 8.
It is.
Yes,
Episode
it is.
8 is his
The overloaded
So yeah, so
bandwidth,
like
yeah.
that, yeah. I mean, his speech is incredible. So I mean,
So
B
that's
tier is correct.
B. Episode 9, I want to say A. This is the one
I
that
agree.
culminates in the Fatal Attractions moment.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, much like episode 7, this feels just like A tier all the way. I mean,
Yeah. Yes.
there might be parts of it that are S tier, but this is a really good episode.
And I love it. You've mentioned a few times certain episodes just feel like X-Men.
Yes.
The split the teams and even the look of them, like this just feels like X-Men.
In some ways, it is like the best X-Men episode of the series.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
In terms of capturing like the essence of what it felt like to
Yes.
read those books
Yeah.
in the 80s and 90s runs of it. Yeah.
Exactly right. You know, because
Yep.
you know, like the S tier ones are just they almost like transcend the X-Men, where it's like, man, these are just fucking great. Like
Yeah.
anybody could sit down and watch this. You know, it's a Wrath of Khan, you know, of X-Men, where it's like
There
you could get someone who isn't a sci-fi person, but they just like good movies, and be
Sure.
like, check this shit out. Like I know you don't like Star Trek, but check this out. The S tier ones are like, this is some seriously good writing. Not to disparage the other episodes,
Not at all.
but yeah, this one, the middle episode of the ending trilogy is just like, it's just X-Men to the core. It's
Big
like,
time.
it's such a great love letter to just like that classic Claremont writing, and just, no, not just Claremont, but just whenever any good writer is working on the X-Men, it's like, yes, this is exactly what I want from this property.
You're right.
That's
It's
what
not
you get in
just
this
Claremont.
episode.
Shout out to many folks who've worked on the X books
Of
over the
course.
years. Yep.
I'm just a Claremont fanboy, so I always go there first.
Sure. And I iconically, I think we can credit, him, not just him, but, even though others took it and ran with it, he turned it from a very generic,
A failing
60s, failing comic book into something memorable. And others added on to what made it memorable, but like that was a real important turn. Giant Size X-Men #1, etc.
Yeah, he created the vibe that became the X-Men.
That's a good way to put it. Okay, last one, episode 10, Tom's Distinction Part 3. This, I do feel like it's a slight step down from 9, but I wonder if it's just lower in A or if it's all the way in B. B is an honorable place to be still.
It might be the best of the Bs.
Yeah, it's either the best of the Bs or the bottom of the As.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because it has an absolutely great fight.
Oh, several like chapters of an absolutely great fight.
Yeah, and I do think that moment, kind of like, at the end of 3 when they give up Nathan.
Yes.
Like here we sort of see like the sequel to that scene where
the
they're
diner.
saying goodbye to Cable in the diner.
Yeah.
And that's a great
Yes.
scene. It's a great
Yes.
scene. So like those things make me want to give it an A.
Yeah.
But
let's talk about what pulls it down a little bit from that then. I love Jean Grey. I love Phoenix. The way they do the Phoenix there does feel very Deus Ex Machina. The Xavier Magneto stuff.
that doesn't work.
That sits funny. It's not just a quality issue. There's also like it hits as the audience, like our ethical center a little wrong. Like Xavier's doing sketchy, as good as he thinks he's doing sketchy shit. And there's not really comeuppance for that, right? There's not really a sense. I don't know.
No,
So it
there's
makes
no
it sit
acknowledgement that it's the wrong thing to do. It
Not
is
significantly,
played.
no.
It is played as like you should be rooting for him to do this.
Right. And I don't feel comfortable with that.
No, yeah, it's antithetical to what the show has been to this point, which
And
I think so that the Xavier Magneto kind of brings it down to clearly in the B range.
Let's put it in B. Honestly, the distribution here, just looking at it as a whole now,
Yeah,
that looks right.
it does.
Where it is top heavy. It skews towards really strong, and even the bad's not so bad.
Listen, 2S, 3A, 3B, 1C, 1D.
Yeah.
If you can get that out of a show these days,
Yeah,
that's as good as it gets.
awesome. All right, so that's downloaded. We'll put that on the socials. We'll wait until the episode drops. So as you listen to this, that's now, but in our world, that's coming soon.
Yeah, it's like in that scene in Spaceballs where they fast forwarded the movie.
That's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's the code on my luggage.
I love that movie.
All right.
That's one of the first comedies I ever fell in love with. Just as a
That's
side note,
it's a good time, isn't it?
it is a very good time.
Mel Brooks. Just I love him. Not every movie's as good as every other movie, but there's such a fingerprint on just what comprises our like macro cultural sense of humor, right? There's just so much there's so many jokes that you can trace them back to like, oh well, Mel Brooks did that in in the 70s or something, and now we're just kind of echoing it now.
I don't believe in heroes, but he's one of those guys who's like as close to a hero as I can have. Did you know, Matthew, that Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, I believe, came out in the same year?
I didn't know that. I wasn't consciously aware of that. No.
They're
Wow.
either a year
What
apart
a year.
or the same year. Yeah,
What a year.
yeah.
Did you know, I think I heard this, that one of his, before he really became a name for himself, he was a writer or creator for the show Get Smart, which looking back, it's like, oh, yeah, he was. Look at that humor like that. Certainly he was. Boy, it makes me realize like, I really did watch Nick at Night.
Oh my God, I watched
a
it so
kid.
much.
Oh, nostalgia for a time I wasn't even alive. All
Yep.
right. So the other tier list we wanted to do.
Just
Go
to
ahead,
be
Brett.
Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, both came out in 1974. What a year.
Damn. All
Yeah.
right. Wow.
Imagine releasing two of the greatest comedies of all time in the same year.
I plan to.
Oh God, if
Someday.
only.
We're gonna publish we're gonna turn your screenplays into movies, Brett, and then we'll have done the same thing.
Well, yeah, my comedy screenplay very much a love letter to Mel Brooksian-esque comedy.
That's right. Okay. So the other tier list that we wanted to do is ranking the characters, but not by how much we just like the character, but how well their arc as a character was handled in this season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's enough characters in the show. We'll just use the ones that whoever created this template. Thanks, Gab Menz, whoever you are. We know you're a fan of the show too.
Yep. Hopefully you're not a type of person on the internet.
I sure hope not. I think in this, rather than go character by character, maybe we just go tier by tier and talk about who we think belongs there.
That's a great idea.
All right. Do you want to work from the bottom up or from the top down?
Top down, I think. I think it's best to figure out who are the leaders, so to speak.
All right. I'm going to propose that in S tier, Cyclops belongs there.
Agreed.
Rogue belongs there.
Ooh.
Magneto belongs there.
I mean, absolutely, Magneto.
And of who's remaining, you could push me a little bit on Gambit, maybe. Yeah, I put Gambit as a maybe. If not, he's A.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else belong in S? Does Jubilee belong in S, or is she an A?
I think she's an A. So here's my thought. I think Bastion belongs in S tier.
You could convince me of that, sure.
Even though he's not in a lot of the season,
Yeah.
the voice actor is so good. As I said at the top of the show, his sort of arc is so clear
Love, yeah.
and certainly, I think maybe thought-provoking is the wrong phrase, but there's something about that shift from this very confident, calculated nihilist to at the end just a desperate maniac nihilist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just
Yeah.
it's just such a clear arc, and I think an effective arc. There are parts in that last episode where he's sort of hinting at like, oh, I have the urges, and it's like he's kind of being taken over by the Alex Mack goo, Sentinel goo, which is
How
not
demure of
clear
you.
and a little abstract, which kind of, depending on how you look at it, either makes it more complicated or just more stupid. But
Yeah.
I think as a overall season bad guy, great stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Let's put him in S for now. If anything, he represents sort of the cusp between S and A.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, that's kind of where I feel like Gambit is too. So if we start to fill in the A tier, I think Gambit and Jubilee both belong there.
I would put Storm there.
I'm worried. Are we biased by the fact that we like Storm the character? Because her arc, right? The life death stuff could have been better.
It could have, and it does remove
I love
her.
Storm the character. Right?
So here's why I would put her in A. And maybe this isn't what this tier list is about,
Okay.
but when she's in fight scenes, she's also an absolute badass.
Oh, certainly.
Some of the best imagery in this show is of her. When she loses her powers and she's packing her bag and the lightning strikes and she's scared by it because she doesn't feel it. In episode
that's great.
one,
That is great.
when she's walking across the desert and the tornadoes turning the sand into glass and the lightning, intolerance is extinction, where she leaves the Blackbird and she gets the tornadoes going to fight the Sentinels.
Yeah.
She also has, I mean, again, are we including this as criteria in the tier list? But she also has the best evolution of costumes. She has the white costume. She has the mohawk. She has the original black costume. You just get so much from her.
The thing that sold me the most of all the things you just listed, the immediate aftermath of when she loses her powers, that if we're just taking that part of it, that's like S tier level stuff.
Yeah.
So I think the rest of it being not handled as well as it could have been probably just drops her as far as A tier, not further than that. I think you've made a pretty compelling case with that. That in terms of just character arcs, every point you made is true about why she's awesome.
Yeah.
But in terms of what this tier list is, I think that's the deciding factor for me.
Yeah. So here's my next question for you. How do you deal with Jean Grey and Madeline Pryor? Do you consider them a package, or do you do separate?
I was going to say, I mean, they're separate here in the form, but even if that wasn't the case, they are separate.
Yeah.
So wait, before we get to them, does DaCosta belong in A or is he B?
Yeah, DaCosta is tough because he doesn't get a ton of screen time.
But he does have a very clear like viewpoint character through line throughout the season.
He might have the clearest in some ways.
Yeah. So I'd probably put him in A, that because it's not a measure of how much we like the character, but how well they handled the arc. And I do think they handled his arc very well.
Yeah.
Here's another one I'm worried about my bias. I love Nightcrawler. How was his arc as a character here?
I mean, he's a very static character.
He is static.
Which is fine, but
statically awesome.
Yeah. I think Nightcrawler is part of what I think might be a bloated B tier, which is like a secondary character who just absolutely nails his role on the team. So like Nightcrawler does that. I think Beast does that. I think Wolverine does that, right? Like
Wolverine is B. Well, that's one of the ones I felt strongly. Wolverine is a solid B tier character in this season.
They don't get they don't get a ton of like their arc isn't very bendy, right? It's just straight. Right. It's kind of like a straight line. Although Beast does have those great moments with Trish Tilby near the beginning, in the middle of the season. But like, they're like role players. They're like the perfect role players in the season.
Yeah.
And I would put Jean Grey and Madeline Pryor in B tier.
Both of them?
I think so, because you think about, Madeline, again, episode 3 is very rushed.
Yeah.
But they do bring her back. She does get that closure. I think Jean is great. I'd be tempted to almost put her in A tier, Jean Grey.
Yeah. It's certainly the best presentation we've had in this animated series.
Yeah.
Yeah. Much better than the old actual 90s series.
And I would actually, it's tough because he's in so few episodes. But
Bishop?
I'm almost inclined to put Cable in B tier.
Oh, maybe. Yes. So I had him at A or B. I'm not sure which.
I just don't think he's in enough of it to be A tier.
That's true, because he doesn't show up until end of episode 7, right? Well,
I mean, he has a cameo in episode 5.
Well, and he's a baby in episode 3. And I guess the end of 2. Yeah.
He does great work. He does great work as a baby.
He's a child star.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, B probably feels right, considering the brevity. All right. Bishop probably C, again, only because we get so little time with him.
Yeah.
I like Bishop, but he doesn't have a character arc in this.
I mean, I would put him in D. I like Bishop too, but he's kind of just there to take Nathan. Like, that's sort of his role in the season. He doesn't have any scenes really with him and another character. I mean, he has that scene in episode 3 with what he thinks is his sister, but that's
not much.
Yeah.
I guess as I'm conceptualizing, and I'm open to this not being the way to view it. To me, C feels like a true neutral, and whereas to B and D, I almost feel it has to be like, I dislike something about how this arc went.
So if that's the case, I see what you mean. If that's the case, then like Forge is C, Sinister is C.
Yep, that's where I would put them as well. They included Emma Frost on this, which is weird. She doesn't have much of an arc, so she's also C.
I guess so, yeah. If you were just
Xavier's D, because I found myself liking him less and less as it went on.
Yep.
So Morph is a curious one, and you alluded to this earlier. I like a lot of what they did about Morph, but Morph doesn't get a chance to like be a full person and be a full participating character as much as some of the other folks do.
I almost wonder if they were afraid to
To do
spend
more
more
with
time on
Morph?
Morph.
Maybe.
And I wonder if they were afraid to do it because they made Morph non-binary, gave them the they them
Mhm.
pronouns. Like,
Yep.
did they not want to call too much attention to that character? Not that Morph has ever been a major character.
No. But I mean, if you think, all right, if we just think about the arc, like sort of the important character beats, there's kind of two arcs for Morph. One is they have been traumatized by their past experience with Sinister. They use that to help the team find him in episode 3. And then taunting Sinister after Phoenix defeats him is like kind of gotten over it. And that's kind of weak. Morph is a very passive character in overcoming that piece of their past.
Yeah.
The stronger arc for Morph is, and it's only touched on lightly, but kind of just the relationship arc as relates to feelings towards Wolverine.
Yeah. And they do a nice job of hinting towards it. I think it's in episode 3 where Morph is like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'll scratch your back with the claws."
Yeah, during as the mansion starts to turn into a nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a scene where Morph turns into Sabretooth and like wrestles with Wolverine during
That's
like a
true.
montage. And then there's sort of the end of it.
Yeah, the love admission while in the guise of Jean Grey.
Mm-hmm. But Morph also does have some of the best jokes, I think,
True.
in this. So I would easily give Morph C tier.
C, I would say C at least.
Yeah,
What I'm wondering is, does Morph belong in B tier? Because there's enough good, and I feel like there's not so much bad as like, I just wish there was more that we got to explore with this character.
Yeah.
What do you think, C or B? I think this is a C or B character arc.
So I guess it's like, does Morph have a better arc than Forge? Because I think Forge is probably the best character in C. Because we get the life death episodes with Forge. Even those episodes aren't great.
Yeah.
We learn about his past and we learn about how he helped invent the technology that robs Storm of her powers. And I mean, there's like real meat on the bone there. It's not, we don't get to chew that meat a lot, but it is there. Does Morph get more than that? I don't really think so.
Maybe not. More screen time, more consistently throughout the season, but not with a ton of depth.
Yeah.
So that, comparing to Forge, they are probably comparable.
Yeah, they're on the same
for
tier.
different reasons.
And speaking of like shapes, like this feels like a good shape for the show, looking at this.
So here's what I'm wondering, and you brought this up before too. Does Madeline or Jean or both actually belong in A tier?
I feel like if you think of like their journey, kind of like a singular journey where we have Madeline at the start,
Yeah.
and then Jean kind of finishes that part of the journey.
Yeah.
Because the thing that really jumps out to me is the idea that Madeline goes through this whole thing where she's not sure what's real, but she's like, no, I know that Nathan is real. I know that I was pregnant. I know that I had this, which would be more impactful if episode 3 had a bit more time to breathe. Unfortunately, it did not. And then as this, when that transition happens and we switch more to Jean, and she talks about like, I remember feeling Nathan kick inside. Like, that's intense stuff for a cartoon.
Yeah.
And she has that really good scene with Cyclops in the catacombs when they're looking for the survivor and they find, what's her face?
Emma Frost.
Emma Frost, thank you. Like, that's a really good scene for her. And then she gets to say goodbye to Nathan. Like, so she does become like a surrogate mother to him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just hard for me to separate those two arcs. I feel like they're a package deal. I mean, I know you see them differently.
I do. I see them as separate characters, but also you're right. It's kind of impossible to detangle their stories from each other.
Yeah.
They are inextricably linked.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're right. Jean does pick up the baton on the relationship with Nathan specifically. So do you think that means they both should move up a tier?
I do. I would put them together in the A tier.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look at this as a whole. Boy, B tier is full of, I think you said it perfectly earlier, like great characters who we just didn't focus on as much.
Yeah, but they fill their roles perfectly. Like they each
did. They're
have
supporting
emotional
roles.
they all have emotional moments.
Yep.
They all contribute to just like the emotional journey of like the entire story.
Yes.
Nightcrawler is sort of like an anchor there spiritually for people. Beast gets to show that like the quiet guy who finally reaches his breaking point and he's just like very curt with somebody. He's like, something has happened
here. See, I always thought it's Nightcrawler who's curt.
Wolverine doesn't really have that.
Remember to tip your waitress.
Cable certainly has that moment where he's like, he wants revenge for his mom. Wolverine, his emotional beats are more like personal, not so much the movement.
True.
But they all fill a role and really nail it.
Yeah. I feel pretty good about this. You could argue that some of them are at one cusp or the other of the tier they're in, but I don't think you could really argue for anyone to jump more than one tier based on how we have it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said last time, like this just seems like it looks right. 4 S tier, 6 A tier. Although, like we said, Jean and Madeline are kind of 1. 4B, 5C, and only 1D. Goddamn Xavier. Just the caboose.
He had a rough go of it, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we got those saved. We'll put those on the socials. So to recap our 2 tier lists for the episode quality tier list, and these all go in ascending order.
Mm-hmm.
And our D tier was episode 6, Life Death Part 2. The C tier was episode 4, Motendo and Life Death Part 1. B tier was the pilot, the episode 1. I guess it's not really a pilot. To Me, My X-Men. And then episodes 8 and 10, Tolerance of Distinction Part 1 and 2, round out
1 and 3.
B tier. Oh, yeah, boy. The A tier episodes we said were 3, Fire Made Flesh, 7, Bright Eyes, and 9, Tolerance of Extinction Part 2. And the crown jewels of the season, episode 2, Mutant Liberation Begins, and episode 5, Remember It. That looks right.
Mm-hmm.
And our character tier list, oh boy, the D tier is a lonely place for Charles Xavier. C tier was where we placed Forge, Morph, Bishop, Sinister, and White Queen, who I don't even know if I would have included her if she wasn't just included in this template.
Yeah, I don't know why this person included her.
She didn't really have an arc. But yeah, that's our C tier. B tier is just a great place to hang out with Nightcrawler, Beast, Wolverine, and Cable. A tier is where we've got Gambit, Jubilee, Storm, Sunspot, Jean, and Madeline. And then our S tier was filled by Cyclops, Rogue, Magneto, and Bastion. And those are not necessarily ordered within their tiers any particular way, but that feels good to me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the only change I would make,
I'm listening,
is I could be talked into Jean and Madeline being S tier.
Ooh.
Because if you think about them as a packet like that, it is the arc. It is their arc. When have we seen them? I mean, we never see Madeline anywhere, but when have we seen that be better?
So how you're phrasing it to me sounds like you're saying, if we were making a tier list of how Jean and or Madeline have been handled within this series, this is the top. It hasn't been better than this.
Yeah.
But relative to how moved, how compelled, how transfixed was I by watching their story play out over the course of the season?
Yeah.
Is it at Magneto level? Is it at Cyclops or Rogue level? I don't know. It's not that far off.
What hurts the Madeline Jean combo and probably keeps them out of S tier is that even though they have great scenes, Madeline has a great scene with Storm where they talk about being pregnant and you might not want your kid to be a mutant. Jean has a great scene with Cable at the end, but they never give those characters a great speech.
That's true.
Even though Madeline does become Goblin Queen, and that is a great fight, and Jean does fight Sinister, which is a really good fight. But I mean, I guess they just don't have like that singular moment. Like Cyclops has singular moments, Rogue has singular moments, Bastion and Magneto have singular moments. I don't know if Madeline and Jean have that, which maybe keeps them in the A tier. Yeah,
I think so. I think they're good where they are. Yeah, so again, I think you could make the case for any of these to maybe go up or down one tier, but not. I don't think more than that, looking at how we've got it spread.
Yeah.
Awesome. We did it. We did that.
Beautiful.
All right, so should we be heading over to our live coverage of the Manchies?
We should.
Oh, okay, we're moving now to our live coverage. Welcome to the first Man Children of the Atom Awards. The stars are here. We're going to see the best and the brightest receive their recognition for their work. Welcome to the Manchies.
Mm-hmm. All right, you want to kick it off or should I?
Well, why don't you go?
All right, so our first award is for Best Fighter. The nominees are Rogue, Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, Logan, aka Wolverine, Kurt Wagner, aka Nightcrawler, and Jubilation Lee, aka Jubilee. And the winner is Rogue.
Congratulations to Rogue. He was not able to be here with us this evening. But some fine work, put in some of the best fights in the season. I don't think a bad fight amongst them.
No, and just it's because there are two occasions where she just goes absolutely hog wild on people. You know, Logan
She
is
really
cool, Nightcrawler cool, Jubilee cool, Cyclops cool. They all have good fights and good moments, but nobody unleashes the fury like Rogue does, and she does it twice.
100%. Oh, so along the same lines, now instead of the fight or the scene, we have our award for Best Fight Scene. The nominees: Wolverine and Nightcrawler versus the Prime Sentinels in Episode 8. Rogue versus the U.S. Army in Episode 7. Magneto, Cyclops, Bishop, and Morph versus the Goblin Queen in Episode 3. Jean Grey versus Mr. Sinister in Episode 9. And Rogue, Sunspot, Nightcrawler, Cyclops, and Jubilee versus Bastion, Episode 10. And the winner is Magneto, Cyclops, Bishop, and Morph versus Goblin Queen from Episode 3. Accepting the reward on behalf of this group is Bishop. Let's come up to the podium.
He's time jumping up to the podium.
On behalf of all of us, I just want to say thank you for recognizing the care we put into that scene. It is an honor and a privilege to hold this award in my hands and carry it home for the team. Butterfingers. Oh, damn, that thing is as slippery as baby Nathan. Whoa. Oh, and he's fallen through a time portal again, leaving the award falling to the floor. Oh.
Those slippery time holes that was popping up. The next is maybe my favorite one, which is Best Speech. The nominees: Val Cooper's Magneto Was Right in Episode 8, Magneto's Shared World in Episode 2, Bastion's Overload Their Bandwidth in Episode 8, Nightcrawler's Eulogy for Gambit in Episode 7, and Cyclops' Because I Have to Stomach Your Questions and Prove That I'm a Person in Episode 5. The winner, Magneto's Shared World.
Maybe just come up to the podium now. I spoke these words. Charles Xavier trusted me with his dream, and it does not ask you to love or embrace my kind as your own, but merely to accept that this is a shared world with a common future, and that my kind, like yours, have the right to live in it. I am trying to be better. Please, do not make me let you down. Well, you did. Fuck you. Fuck Xavier. Fuck your kind. Fuck this shared world. Fuck trying to be better. Fuck Bastion. Fuck Wolverine. Fuck time travel. Fuck the Shi'ar. Fuck the Brood. Fuck Sinister. Fuck Sentinels. Fuck Crash Bandicoot. Fuck Ted Kaczynski. Fuck Joanne Fabric. Fuck Cactus Head Puppets. Fuck Cheer Captain. Fuck Men Children of the Atom. And fuck this award. I'm going to Asteroid M with a big bag of edibles, and I don't want to see any of you for I don't even know how long. Oh, there he goes. Oh,
I would
boy.
love for someone to go off at an awards ceremony to that degree, or really even, on the news.
Yeah.
It'd be wonderful.
Well, he didn't slap anybody in the face, at least.
Yeah.
All right. The next award is for the character with the worst family. Our nominees.
A crowded field in the X-Men universe.
No kidding. We had to narrow down the nominees list. Nominees: Roberto da Costa, a.k.a. Sunspot, for Nina da Costa. Lilandra Naramani for Deken and Deathbird. Charles Xavier for Juggernaut, Kurt Marco, and Cassandra Nova. Nightcrawler and Rogue for Mystique and Graydon Creed. And Sean Cassidy, a.k.a. Banshee, for Black Tom Cassidy. And the winner, at least based on the plot of X-Men 97, is Roberto da Costa, a.k.a. Sunspot. Wow, thank you, everyone. I just want to say the next time my house burns down, it won't be an accident. Obrigado.
The next category is Most Annoying Character. The nominees are Charles Xavier, Mojo, The Adversary, President Robert Kelly, and Lalandra. How do you say your last name?
Naramani?
Naramani. And the winner is, well, how could it be anybody else? Charles Xavier, come on up.
I just want to say, if there is indeed anything annoying about me, just know it is only for the good of my children of the atom, and for you in the audience as well. And you know that, and that is why you forgive me, no matter what I might do. It is always for the right reasons, and therefore I am always justified. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Our next award is for the most fitting use of an actual song. This is a briefer category. We have 3 nominees. Turn, Turn, Turn to Everything There Was a Season by the Byrds. Happy Nation by Ace of Base. And The Purple People Eater by Sheb Woolley. And the winner is Happy Nation by Ace of Base. Accepting the award on behalf of Ace of Base is Guido Carosella, a.k.a. The Strong Guy. Hey, in between tours with Leela Cheney, I briefly worked security for Ace of Base back in '94 at the MTV Europe Music Awards. Yeah, damn, those chicks were hot. Like, damn. The Swedes, right? I mean, sure, they'd be honored to receive this Manchie. Yeah. See ya.
Strong Guy, everybody. The next category is Horniest Character.
Oh, baby.
The nominees, Morph, Remy LeBeau, a.k.a. Gambit, Charles Xavier, Eric Magnus Lencher, Magneto, or Madeline Pryor, Goblin Queen. The winner is Madeline Pryor, our favorite queen.
Ooh. Congratulations to Madeline Pryor. It looks like there is a wardrobe malfunction keeping her from joining us.
Also a posthumous award.
Yeah. And oh boy, a whole bunch of people just earned nominations for Horniest Character. Congratulations to the audience. Yeah. All right. Next up is the Best Non-Uniform Variant Outfit. Our nominees: Suit and Tie Magneto from the end of Episode 1, Mohawk Storm, Dr. Beast, Father Nightcrawler, and Abscissa Jubilee. And the winner is Abscissa Jubilee. Oh, and accepting on behalf of Abscissa Jubilee is Mojo. Yeah. Abscissa is my intellectual property, babe. That means any award she wins, I win. So I'd like to thank the Academy, the fawning audiences, the spineless masses who tune in to keep Mojo the undisputed king of entertainment. I own you. Stay tuned, dipshits.
Most throwaway death on Genosha. The nominees: Moira McTaggart, Sean Cassidy, also known as Banshee, Sebastian Shaw, Dazzler, Marrow. And the winner is Moira McTaggart.
Moira, if you're here, please come to the podium. Moira? Oh.
Yet
Right.
another posthumous award.
Moving on then to the most inflated insurance bill. Our nominees: The Blackbird, the X Mansion, Cyclops' Porsche, Wolverine's Jeep, and the DaCosta's homeowner's policy. The winner is the Blackbird. And accepting on behalf of the Blackbird is Robert Drake, certified public accountant, a.k.a. the Iceman. Yeah, ever since I got my degree in accounting, Professor X had me start keeping track of the budget, and man, there's about a million things that would need to change to really get things in order. But there's been 6 years just since I started looking at the books where our budget for jet replacement and repairs was actually slightly above the U.S. Navy's. It's been higher than Boeing. We don't just go through jets. We pay through the nose for the ones we do have. No negotiation, no lowest bidder, just... Man, we're real lucky some X-Men are rich as shit. All right. And Brett, our final award of the evening. Bring us home, Daddy.
Most cringe-inducing nickname.
Oh, boy.
Possibly also my favorite category. A writhing thing of chance. Mr. Sinister's horrible nickname for Cable. Brimstone clone. Magneto's nickname for Madeline Pryor. Blue Rogaine ad. Wolverine's taunt for Beast. My children and or my children of the atom for Professor X referring to his X-Men. And Dirty Girl, Mojo's reference for Jubilee. The winner is...
Crowded field.
Very crowded. The winner is Brimstone Clone. Magneto could not accept this award because he already stormed off.
He left, yeah. Oh, looks like Mojo's grabbing the trophy and scuttering off with it. Wow.
These little robotic spider legs.
Little crab legs, yeah. Oh, that was the first Man Children of the Atom Awards. Thank you for joining us at the Manchies. And that brings us to our final segment of the episode, the Mailbag of the Atom. So we reached out to some of the folks we know have been listening to the show to get some questions they wanted answered on the air.
I'll start this one off. This first one is from my very good friend, Ron. He asked, he wouldn't mind hearing our opinions on what collections of runs to read that are either really essential stories or just really good reads for a new reader. So I turned around and I went through my various lists of books. I came up with a couple.
Please take it.
First is Inferno. We've talked about this one a bunch. I know that some people now digest their comics via the internet with the Marvel app. So sure. I don't know if they have, like if you could just click on like X-Men Inferno and you just have that, or if you have to track down the individual issues. But if that is the case, very quickly, I'll just say that Inferno is Exterminators 1 through 4, Uncanny X-Men 239 through 243, X-Factor 35 through 39, and New Mutants 71 through 73. It's one of those crossovers where you don't need to know a ton prior to it to really get into it, and it's just a ton of fun. It's just a really fun crossover.
It is. There's odd things about it, like different moments have very different tones. And I will say, Brett, because you brought this up talking about episode 3, it's like, oh, there's 2 villains. They deal with Goblin, and then they have to go deal with Sinister. That actually does mirror the comic arc where it's like, all of Inferno basically happens, and then it's like, it almost feels like a postscript, like, oh, and then also we still have to deal with Sinister. Well, sorry if we're in spoiler territory on that.
No, it's all right. And
for a comic from the 1980s.
Yeah, and it's also obviously very different from the cartoon, so you're not really going to... It's not like anything's been spoiled for you.
That's true.
There's another book that I'm going to recommend. It's out of continuity. This is back when Marvel, DC probably as well, first started really experimenting with the idea of the graphic novel, which is just a writer has an idea, let them come up with an idea that's, whatever, 100 pages or whatever, and just release that. And one of the best X-Men versions of that is a book called God Loves, Man Kills.
Ah, yes.
This is the graphic novel featuring William Stryker. You know him from X2, where he's played by Brian Cox.
Or a version of him anyway.
A version of him. In that movie, he is like a general or disgraced general. In the book, he's a preacher. He very much plays, like the televangelist or, nowadays internet preacher who basically tells you that God is commanding you to hate everybody that's different from you.
Yep.
And you want to talk about a really good Magneto book. This has some great Magneto stuff in it.
Ooh, okay.
And so highly recommend that one. If you've never read it, Matt, I have it. You can borrow it from me.
I haven't actually, yeah.
And so in this last one, this is something that I talked about on a previous episode. I almost said previous issue. And so there is Marvel has a couple different X-Men omnibuses. They actually have a ton because they have all these different lines of omnibuses like Milestone and this and that. But there is one that is X-Men Marvel Omnibus Volume 1. And it is Uncanny X-Men 244 to 269. And this is it's one of my favorite omnibuses that I own. It includes the introduction of Jubilee. This is the team when they're living in Australia. It's them going through the Siege Perilous and starting over. So there is part of this book where you kind of get to see the end of one era of Claremont's run and then the beginning of a sort of a new era of his run.
Sure.
We see Gambit gets introduced in issue 266. So speaking of the end and beginning of a run, this is kind of the end of Mark Silvestri's run as the main artist and the beginning of Jim Lee's run. Jim Lee's run is interesting because he comes on for a few issues. He leaves, he comes on, he leaves.
Yeah.
Jim Lee is obviously the better artist. He's one of the most famous comic book artists of all time. But Mark Silvestri, for me, he's one of those artists that typifies a really charming era of comic book art where it's not as detailed as Jim Lee, but there's just something fun about it that I really like.
Awesome.
I didn't read these issues as a kid. I only read them as a grown adult. But I
still haven't read them.
It's one of those pieces of art, kind of like the Twilight Zone for me, where I did not watch them as a kid. I did not read these as a kid. But as soon as I saw it, I was nostalgic for it. Like that feeling that feeling you get when you're nostalgic for something that you can't be nostalgic for logically, but it just evokes this really this childhood joy in you.
You know what? I'm gonna jump outside of the world of the X-Men on this, and a couple of years ago where I got that specific feeling, Brett, was when I had COVID for the first time. One of my things was I've always heard the Golden Girls, the little bit I've seen of it, I really liked. So I'm actually just going to start watching the Golden Girls. And then it became a thing where Tracy and I would do jigsaw puzzles and have it on in the background. Oh, beautiful. And it felt so nostalgic to have a show like that on that looked the way it looked with the sets and just kind of the music design and the episode and the joke structure, that even though I had not seen hardly any of that show as a kid, it really brought me back to being a kid and just the TV being on at that time. It really captured an era. So I think that it's that exact feeling of it's nostalgia for something I didn't actually really experience, but it brings me back to that time.
I think what really helps, Golden Girls is one of the perfect shows for this.
Oh, it's so good.
And it's one of those things where it's just, this might be the X-Men at their most fun.
Okay.
There's no, the Siege Perilous isn't a major crossover or anything. It's not even really a major arc.
Yeah.
But there's just something about all these individual issues in this run that's really fun. Yes, it's obviously serious. Yes, there's serious moments, but there's always an adventure to it. I'll give you an example. Okay. There's an early issue in the Omnibus 245, where it's actually Rob Liefeld is the artist on it. And there's a scene where there's a bunch of aliens. There's an alien on a ship, and he's, it's very much we're going to destroy the Earth. It's very comic booky in that way. And we get a page here where we get a bunch of cameos where Rob Liefeld just went to town and he drew Tall Yoda, he drew a Xenomorph, he drew E.T., he drew Boba Fett and Jabba the Hutt. And this is a time when you could do that and not get sued and not cause a controversy. And it's just
now Disney owns at least 60% of those characters associated with this book.
I know they do. More than that.
Probably more than
that.
But
just 244 to 269 obviously doesn't need to be that. You could probably, if you have, again, the Marvel comic app, you could probably go back to 240 or 235 or something and see when they first get to Australia.
And I think, Brett, you mentioned this when we were prepping for this episode. Also, check with your, whatever local library you have, if their online collection, because some of them do have a good selection of graphic novel omnibus and stuff like that. And I think I I am very tempted to see if they have this very one, because I really like to read this.
Yeah, once again, I'm going to pound the desk and I'm going to say, if you do not have a card to your local library, you must do this.
Oh,
You
get a
must go to
clue,
your
you
library
idiot.
and then download the Hoopla app,
Yes.
Hoopla.
There it is.
They don't have a massive collection of books, but their comic book collection is great.
I love that.
Marvel, DC, they've got great runs there.
Good.
Absolutely go for it. It's a great resource. Your taxes pay for it. Libraries are an
Yeah.
incredible resource.
They
Please go
are.
there.
We love it. Libraries, thanks for listening.
Thank you for your support. As a follow-up to this question,
Oh, wait, hold on. Before you do, I
Go
want to
ahead,
throw one into, which it's the most cliched answers someone who likes X-Men could give to this. But if you haven't read it, the collection of the Dark Phoenix saga, that's one that I do own the graphic novel collection of it. And I've reread it so many times since I purchased it years ago, because it's such a great moment in that era. We get to hang out with a lot of different characters during that whole run. We get like the introduction of Kitty Pryde. We get Dazzler, we get the Hellfire Club, we get the Shi'ar and the Imperial Guard. Like it is a romp and an iconic. Yeah, go ahead.
it's really fun to read that, and then you can go back to the '92 show and watch the episodes because they're they're a really good complement to each other.
Yep. And there's something about that era, the color palette they use for it, which it's not like realistic, but it's very appealing. It's a very appealing color palette that they drew on back then.
We're getting off topic here, but whatever. At some point in the evolution of American culture, we were like, hey, you know what we don't need anymore? Bright colors.
Color, yeah.
All houses now, the interiors are gray and white. All movies are washed out. Like even movies that like Wicked, the movie Wicked, like
okay.
It has color. There's a difference between having
green,
color.
famously, I think. Yeah.
There's a difference between having color and being colorful.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And it like doesn't have that vibrant color to it. And it's just like
odd for a movie that's a spin-off prequel to a movie famous for like ushering in the era of Technicolor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what it is. Digital color doesn't pop on digital like it did on film.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I'm a big return guy when it comes to film. I think digital was a mistake and we should go back to filming on film.
So anyway, you were going to move into the follow-up question here.
Yeah, so there's a follow-up question. Also from Ron.
Okay.
From Ronnie. He says, I've been considering getting a subscription to read comics online. And as someone who has only ever read Joss Whedon's run on Astonishing X-Men, I have no idea where to begin. Obviously a great question. X-Men is overwhelming. And so there's X-Men 273, which is called Too Many Mutants, or Whose House Is This Anyway? And this is the beginning of the end of Claremont's run.
Okay.
And it's the start of Jim Lee's takeover. Uncanny X-Men ends with number 280, and then Jim Lee's, it's just X-Men, they drop the Uncanny. X-Men in 1991 is when Jim Lee is like the writer and the artist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, but 280 didn't end. Uncanny X-Men continued. Just X-Men was a new book that ran concurrently.
So 280 is like the official end of Claremont.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
So if you kind of want to read the end of Claremont's run, which is 273 to 280, that kind of sets up
the 90s era, yeah.
Yeah, it sets up where we're at. It's a point in the X-Men world where there's a ton of X-Men, which is why they break into Gold Team and Blue Team. You could sort of look at that as like the runway.
Would this be around the same time as like Extinction Agenda? Is that around this time?
Extinction Agenda happens basically
just before this?
Once Jim Lee is in charge, I believe.
I see. Okay.
So yeah, like 280, I think leads a little bit into, 280 and then the first couple issues of X-Men 91 lead into Extinction Agenda. So Extinction Agenda is the first big crossover of Jim Lee's career.
Okay, cool. Next question. Actually, it's a pair. So we had some of the people submitted questions that were very similar to each other, so we bunched them together. So this is jointly from Tracy and from Brian. So Tracy's version of the question is, what story arcs do you hope the creators will cover in season 2 and in how many episodes? Brian's, similarly, if you were the showrunners, what storylines would you include in season 2 and what characters would you introduce? So Brett, you've got one that you put down here if you want to take point.
I've been talking a lot. I've been hogging this. I've been a mic hog. Why don't you go ahead and give us your view?
Yeah, okay. So I'll actually give one that I have like mixed feelings about, which is the end of season 1 looks like one of the things it could be setting up is like Age of Apocalypse type stuff, which I do love the pieces I've read from that cross. We've mentioned this on the show before. I don't know if it makes sense or if it's where I actually want them to go in season 2. If they do a nice job adapting it, of course, I'd be happy to watch it, but I don't know if it fits. I don't know.
So my view, I think I wrote this down somewhere. I have a ton of notes about season 2.
Okay.
What I think would be, if they follow a similar trajectory as season 1, they could try and go through, the many strands that they've set up, and then maybe end the season with a 3-part arc, which Age of Apocalypse 1, 2, and 3. And that
I like that.
And that ends the season. Or, it doesn't have to end the season. It could be in the middle of the season or something. But I would not be opposed to, it's another 10-episode season, and 40% of that, or whatever, 30% of that is dedicated to Age of Apocalypse. I absolutely love Age of Apocalypse. I mean, most people do. It's one of the most famous X-Men crossovers.
Very cool.
It's very cool. It's also a massive crossover. Like, there's no way they could do it justice. But an abbreviated version of that would be very cool.
Yeah. And you said do it in 10. I would like there to be a few more episodes in season 2. Not huge. You don't have to double it or anything, but I'd love there to be 12 to 15 just because it would give us a little more breathing room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. Other storylines or arcs we would hope they would cover. And I guess this goes with what Kara's just. I would love to see, and I feel like they very clearly were kind of calling this shot with the big like poster of all the X-Men faces in Forge's lab. I just want to spend time with more characters from the X universe that we haven't got to see as much, haven't seen often. Like, I want Colossus, I want Iceman, bring Archangel in there, bring a Shadowcat. Let's finally get Shadowcat in here. There's so many characters who have not just have appeared in the X books, that really do have like a long and storied history with the X-Men that weren't really a significant part of the original run of the show in the 90s. Outside of like, this is the Colossus episode, right? Mm-hmm. This is the Nightcrawler episode, which they gave us that with Nightcrawler. Like, okay, you liked him. Here he is as a real character, an actual character in the flow of the season. I want more of that.
Yeah, Colossus, Shadowcat, Iceman. Those are 3 of the big ones that are like classic X-Men that have never really gotten their due.
Psylocke. We've barely gotten any Psylocke.
I like Psylocke, but for some reason, when people are like, who do you want to see? She's not at the top of my mind.
Okay.
But
that's fair.
Talking about storylines or arcs to cover, we did mention that Cable, Jubilee, and Sunspot are marked as AWOL. I would love to see them start a New Mutants X-Factor type team.
New Mutants / X-Force.
X-Force type team. And to your point, it would be cool if it was like a mix of New Mutants, which could be like Rain. Is that her name? She's the Wolfsbane.
Rain Sinclair, Wolfsbane, yep. Who else? Karma, Mirage, or Moonstar, Cannonball, Magma joined fairly early on with them, I think. Doug Ramsey, Cypher.
Oh, yeah,
Warlock.
Right too. I love Warlock. So like some combination of those guys and maybe the people you mentioned. So like if it's like Colossus and his sister and Ilyana.
Oh,
if it's Iceman and, Karma, whoever. And because there's that talk of like, extremists in whatever place about Magneto, and there's Great and Creed running for president. Like, if Cable formed a team to be like, listen, the X-Men are gone, but the world still needs the X-Men, and he led a team to kind of like hold things down in the present while stuff happened in the future, that would be very cool. I'd like to see that.
Sure. And if there is like mutant sentiment uprising, whatever, in the wake of all this stuff, and we're wanting to do things with Cable, he's a pretty 90s guy. This could be an excuse to have Strife be a villain, an important villain. Yeah.
And that could even play into like season 3 if they get 3 seasons out of it.
You know who we haven't seen really? Havoc. We haven't really seen Havoc at all in this series.
Yeah, he just has that one episode when they do an X-Factor episode. Him and Polaris.
Yeah, right. And he's a throwaway character. He's barely a character in that. Yeah. Anyway, cool.
So the last one I'll say is, so we know that Storm is completely missing. She's the only one of the people who go through the time tunnel that doesn't show up in a new time era.
Yeah.
And so I mentioned that Omnibus 244 to 269. One of those issues, 253, is called Storm Warnings. So when everybody goes through the Siege Perilous, they kind of like their memories get wiped and they all kind of go to different places. Like Colossus goes to New York, he becomes a famous artist. Dazzler becomes a famous singer and she has her own thing. Storm goes through.
Havoc unfortunately becomes a Genosian magistrate.
Right. Yes. He becomes a Nazi foot soldier, basically.
Yeah.
But Storm goes through and she gets de-aged. She becomes a
That's
child.
right.
And she shows up. So Storm, if you don't know, was originally from
For
Cairo.
unrelated reasons, right? Doesn't she go through and it's that didn't age her? Didn't Nanny de-age her?
I think they used the nanotechnology to re-age her. I can't remember.
Oh, is that what it
It
is?
might.
Okay.
It's so much is happening in those books.
All
So
right.
Storm, if you don't know, listeners, is from Cairo in Egypt. After
And
she
if you
goes to
don't
the
know, now
siege,
you know, listeners.
and and after she goes to the siege perilous and becomes a kid again, she shows up in
Yeah.
Cairo, Illinois.
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
what's really
yeah.
cool is it's this cool thing where she shows up and she like collapses in front of a hospital. And so they bring her in and they're like, this kid, like we don't know what her deal is. Like her eyes are all weird and we
Mm.
don't know what the readings are on her. And the Shadow King like senses her. And so the Shadow King
Oh.
starts to hunt her and she starts to realize what's happening. And so she's on the run from the Shadow King and she stumbles across Gambit and they become friends and they become like this pair of thieves, like this older and younger thief. And so they have like their own little adventure while they're running from the Shadow King. And he's like possessing different people as he tracks her down.
Mm.
And so I was thinking with
As he was wont
Gambit
to do.
most likely coming back because of Apocalypse, it
Yeah.
would be interesting if like young Storm is the one who like tries to, maybe instead of Shadow King, Apocalypse tries to recruit her. And so like
Okay.
Storm can kind of be like the humanity that brings Gambit back from being like an acolyte
Oh.
of Apocalypse.
Okay.
So that's
I
again,
don't hate that.
that omnibus is great. So many fun stories. I would love to see them in some way translate this because Storm is obviously great. And what a cool pairing for her and Gambit to come together and maybe,
Yeah.
find like the shared humanity to cast off Apocalypse. That'd be great.
Now this is a digression. It's almost opening up the X-Files, but it never actually got put down on the page. What I've read is that, so we talked a little bit in a previous episode about Claremont's conception of who Sinister really was,
Yeah.
right? That he was this perpetual child who was fixated on Cyclops from their time at the orphanage and right projected his idea of what like a scary mutant would look like. What I didn't know until recently.
A perpetual child who projects his ideas of what a real man looks like. What is this, the internet?
But that
Fuck you,
Gambit
internet.
was well. That originally, I guess, in Claremont's original conception, Gambit was the same, like literally the same, like mutant, and that after Sinister, like quote unquote, dies at the end of Inferno, this kid creates the new persona of Gambit to like infiltrate and monitor the X-Men. But then I guess upon meeting Rogue and like fell in love with Rogue, but like had to be distant from her because he didn't exist and was really like perpetually in a child's body. And so she can't touch physically, but he can't actually present himself like truly either. But then that never went anywhere. And obviously writers took it in different directions, but that Sinister and Gambit were both aspects of this same mutant who
It's
like lives in a child's body. Yeah.
It's kind of like Legion in a way. He's sort of like playing with that idea
In a way.
of
Yeah.
almost like a split personality.
Yeah, and hence like these hints to their connection together, which they later explained in a different way about the Morlock massacre and everything. But yeah, just another one of these like weird. Claremont just had ideas and ran with them, and sometimes he didn't really tell them clearly to people, or even they didn't get to play out all the way. But he was certainly full of like interesting ideas.
Yeah, great writer.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Tracy asks, if you could pull a cable and go back in time to change one thing about the current season, what would that one thing be? We've said it before. I'll say it again. I just wish they were able to give a couple of these storylines more breathing room.
Yeah. I mean, if they could get 12 episodes instead of 10, it would make all the difference in the world.
It would make a huge difference. Yep. That's an easy one for me. Do you, anything else you would change if you go back in time?
No, that's the big one. If I had to choose between quote unquote fixing the Inferno episode or the Life Death, I think I'd fix Life Death just because it's the more damaged of the two.
Yeah. And I'd love to go back in time and do a pass on some of Xavier's characterization, some of his lines, some of his arc. And like you even last time talked about how you would have done it differently in episode 10.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's room to send that back to the writer's room a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a fun one, Brett. So this is from Chris. Excluding any members of the X-Men, so non-X-Men, what character do you most hope to get to see introduced next season? It could be a hero, a villain, a side character. And Tracy asks a similar question. What crossovers do you hope will happen or not happen in future seasons? So who else should be coming in from the bigger world than just the core X-Men team?
So here's...
I have an answer, but you go
No,
first.
you go, because I'm mulling this over.
Yeah, this is from like the maybe early '80s Claremont stuff, but I'd love to see a little peek into Limbo, Belasco, and all them. So
Mm-hmm.
the demon, that the ones that kind of set up that piece of Inferno,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of demonic world, and the way that at times in the comics the X-Men, it hasn't just been sci-fi, like, right? It's leaned into magic and demons and things like that. I'd like to see that. And I remember there being another one from a similar era where they probably couldn't get away with this on the show, but like Dracula. Dracula showed up and like fell in love with Storm, and they had a weird thing play out.
I read
And,
those.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, stuff that widens the genre a little bit beyond just the like superhero and sci-fi is like the bread and butter for X-Men, right? You go into space, it's the more sci-fi, but a lot of just superheroes. I'd love to see a little bit more into like the weird.
So I get the perfect thing for you.
Yeah.
Are you ready for this?
I've been waiting for this my whole life, Brett.
So, and I'm gonna build this into my business pitch to Disney.
Yeah.
So you want to hear my business pitch first, or you want to hear who I want to include?
I want to hear who you want to include first.
So it wouldn't work in this season. So it would have to be like in season 3, because season 2 is already going to be so jam packed. But
All
there
right.
is a book.
Yeah.
X-Men. It's sold as the Asgardian Wars.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this.
All
I never
right.
read the primary source.
So this is a New Mutants special edition in X-Men Annual.
Yes.
So it's basically, so if you don't know, dear listener, comic books, I don't know if they still have this, used to have annuals, which were these, they once a year, they would have a bigger book, like instead of
double size, 64 pages. Yeah.
And it's usually like, it was in continuity, but they usually took a chance to like just sort of disconnect from, actually the Dracula one was an annual, I believe, that they they then later picked up in like in book, in world, whatever. So they basically took the opportunity to have a New Mutants and X-Men annual in Asgard. And like Storm becomes like an Asgardian. There's a badass picture of her. You can see it. She's wielding a hammer.
Oh, hell yeah.
And
is this when Iceman got like a belt, like a power belt? Like,
oh, it's possible. I've only read it once, so I don't know it that well. But
okay.
You want to talk about like expanding the world. I love the fantasy stuff.
Yeah. And it's fun.
It's fun. Exactly.
When did we as a culture become afraid of fun? Stuff can just be fun sometimes. All right. Yeah.
I'm gonna say that the twin evils of 9/11 and Columbine, I think pretty much put the kibosh on fun.
Oh my God.
And then, if you were having fun, it had to be very meta. We had to let people know that we knew we were having fun.
Yeah. That was fun for a moment.
Yeah. So this leads into my business pitch for Disney. I may have mentioned this before. My business pitch is this. Disney, Bob Iger, whoever the hell is running that organization, why are we bothering with live action anymore? If we're being 100% honest, people grew up with these as comic books. And people grew up with them as cartoons. The X-Men cartoon, the Batman cartoon, the Justice League cartoon, the Superman cartoon. And these work better as cartoons. And so give me an 8-episode run of Thor.
Yeah.
I'll take 6 episodes, 30 minutes each. That's 3 solid hours of Thor. And guess what? That's enough Thor for you. You don't need more. The movies have taught us you don't need a lot of Thor.
Yeah.
3 hours of Thor, fantastic. You could do Doctor Strange. You could do Silver Surfer. Like, these are properties that work better as cartoons.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. If you're like, oh, but Brett, the money. We need the money from the movies. Here's what you do. You do what this X-Men show did. Give me 10 episodes of X-Men, right? But instead of ending it with Tolerance's Extinction Part 1, 2, and 3, what you do is you give me 10 episodes, and then Tolerance's Extinction is a movie you release in theaters. And you up the budget, you make the animation a little bit better, and you make it maybe a little bit more violent, and that's how you do it. People, you already do a thing where you have the fucking whatever, the Hawkeye show, and the Daredevil show, and the this show, and you have all these crossover. Just do it with cartoons, which is cheaper.
You said the Hawkeye show, but when you first said it, my ears heard the Hot Guy show. I'm like, which one's the hot guy?
It certainly isn't Jeremy Renner. He is not the hot guy. If I'm picking a hot guy, I think I'm going Chris Evans. I know Chris Hemsworth is probably more attractive. I get a soft spot for Chris Evans.
You can't go wrong with either one.
It's because he's from Boston. What can you do?
Yeah,
I'm a sucker for
true.
that.
There you go.
Just do cartoons. They look better. How badass would it be to get 10 episodes of X-Men and then go to a movie theater and watch an incredible X-Men cartoon? A 90-minute.
Great.
It could be 80 minutes. I don't give a fuck. I'm not.
Yeah.
Just give me a badass X-Men cartoon in a theater. That would be awesome. And Disney is the company that could do that. Nobody else can do that.
True. True.
And you could do crossovers. You could do whatever, 6 episodes of Thor, 6 episodes of whoever else, 6 episodes of whoever else. And then the movie is the crossover. The movie is your Avengers movie.
Okay.
Because I'm sick and tired of bad live action movies.
Oh, well, that's fair.
I started rewatching Endgame.
Yeah.
The first 10 to 20 minutes, I was like, oh, is this like a lot better than I thought it was? Like, than I remember. I've only seen it once. And then it gets to the second half of the movie, or not even, I guess like to the second act of the movie. And I'm like, I'm already bored with this. Like, this is not interesting to me anymore.
You know, I haven't rewatched it in quite some time. I remember liking it, but I don't know how it would hold up. Moving on. All right, let's do as the last one here. Tracy asks, baseball players have songs that they play as they step up to bat during home games. What would be your at-bat songs for some of the characters this season?
Oh, God, this takes creativity, and you're better at that than I am.
I'm going to do one that's the equivalent of like the bingo free space just to get it out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any reason why Bastion wouldn't have Purple People Eater.
Mm-hmm. True.
So let's just cross that off. They did that for us. We didn't have to work for that one.
Do you think Storm would be Riders in the Storm by The Doors?
Maybe. I like that.
I'm going to say Gambit would have When the Levee Breaks from Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
Because it's just a cool song, and he's a cool guy.
Yeah. Alternately, I'll put The House of the Rising Sun, just because it calls out New Orleans.
Or Ace of Spades.
Or Ace. Gosh, who else?
You think Cyclops would just have like The Boys Are Back in Town? Just like a fun, it's like a fun song for Cyclops.
If they're picking them themselves, yeah. Oh, that's the thing. Oh, this is a question framing issue. Is it what we think would be fun for them, or what would they, with their conception of themselves, pick for themselves?
See, but here's the thing: is like, I don't think of Wolverine as a guy that listens to music.
Wolverine certainly has listened to some music.
Wolverine. If Wolverine's picking his own song, it's like Dead Flowers by Townes Van Zandt. It's like a sad country song. You know what I mean?
I don't know why, but I just had the image of Wolverine had ZZ Top, something by ZZ Top.
Shop Dress Man.
I don't know why I thought of them. Yeah.
Oh, here's a fun one. What Gen X song, because she's such a Gen X character, would Jubilee have?
Ooh. Would it be for this show, because it would be 90s, probably Just a Girl by No Doubt.
Oh, interesting. I feel like Jubilee would pick something like super cool that I'm not cool enough to know what that song is.
Maybe. We could just imagine. Whatever song you're thinking of, listener, it's cooler than that.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
It's so cool. You definitely haven't heard it.
She's into the band that inspired your favorite band. All right. She was there first.
I like that.
Oh, Beast. What would Beast pick?
I would say, so I think the easy answer is like something classical, but I think Beast actually might go with something that's more like a classic rock, maybe like a Rolling Stones or something like that. Beast has that side to him, right? Where he gets to cut loose a little bit sometimes.
Oh, Here we go.
Here we go.
He would choose Particle Man by They Might Be Giants.
Oh my God. Oh, that's funny.
The only reason why I know that song is because Tiny Toons. Did you ever watch Tiny Toons as a kid?
I did, sure. Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
They used to have those music episodes.
They sure did.
And that was on that episode. On one of the two.
Yeah, a couple of They Might Be Giant songs that they did that for.
They did the what's the other one?
Istanbul, not Constantinople.
Yes.
What would be a good Rogue one?
She has like a CCR song.
Yeah, I was just said something like classic Southern rock kind of thing.
Yeah, like keep on rolling, Mississippi moon, won't you keep on shining on? Oh, Black Water.
Keep on rolling. Yep. Okay.
That's a great tune.
We have created a very long episode.
We have, and I could keep talking too. I have hopes and fears for season 2, but we're not going to do that. Too much.
We're not. It's almost not today. Maybe we're going to save that. So looking ahead, the release schedule is thrown to the winds. We will record when we have a good idea of something to record, put it out there, and hopefully now that you're subscribed, whenever those things happen, you'll be plugged right in for it. We have some ideas, but maybe what you're talking about, maybe that'll become the last between season thing, would be a season 2 lead up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's the right time to do that, probably.
Love it.
And between them, we've got some ideas. We'll see what actually plays out. But whenever it comes to pass, we will see you next.
Wait.
Wait.
And also, because most of the listeners know us personally, you can influence us and tell us what to do.
This is true. You just have to speak our name 3 times and
We'll
draw
appear.
a circle of salt. And yeah.
Of course. You have to contain us, because otherwise we're just going to eat all your food.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say?
No, I'm good.
No. Okay. You have your like wait, excuse me finger up.
Oh no, I'm doing this because I'm going to try and sync up with you while you do this.
Let's do it. We'll see you next time. Our theme song was written and recorded by Cheer Captain. Find Cheer Captain at cheercaptain.bandcamp.com. To contact Matt or Brett, email us at manchildrenoftheatom@gmail.com.